It's November 27th, 2014. This is the fourth video for what I'm talking about regarding United States government sexual abuse of me and rape of me, as well as torture. So what I was just explaining is how the United States was then had developed this plot of getting me to go along with giving them blowjobs in exchange for my milk bottle, which, you know, by the time I was a little bit older, it wasn't a milk bottle. I wasn't still drinking milk out of a bottle, but they were still doing this form of training for whatever reason next to the refrigerator. Wasn't always by the refrigerator, then they started using other locations, but they kind of kept it consistent in that way for a while. And what they began doing is telling me I started getting beat up if I quit trying to give them a blowjob when they said no and kind of pushed me away, or whatever. They'd say something like one of the cue words, trigger words, to let me know that they wanted this blowjob was, I don't know why they can't make this easier to put on. They'd say something about the condom. And then they would have a specific stance. They'd be standing a certain way, drop their pants, and then be facing me and expecting me to immediately cue into that and help them with their erection problem. And then what happened next is eventually, like as I say, it turned into this this attempt to make it look like they didn't really want the you know, after they had used guns and knives and tortured me to be doing this spontaneously for them on cue, they then wanted it to look like they didn't really want it and they weren't really asking for it, and I was doing it anyway, which can sort of amount to rape, like a woman raping a guy. You know, I mean, you know, I was a kid, they were the adult, so obviously at that time in my life, that's not how it was going to look. But when they were programming me to do that, and repeatedly forcing me to do that under death threats and torture threats, they were trying to get the same response to carry over to when I was a young adult, if I survived. And I don't think most of them thought that I was going to survive to be an adult. But I guess they thought if even by the time I was maybe a teenager, you know, maybe they had a deadline. Maybe they thought by age 16 they'd kill me. Well, maybe they had a bunch of rapes lined up before they decided to kill me at age 16. And they wanted to try to practice the same technique at that time. I mean, who knows? All I know is that they did this. And I remember how shocked I was and how horrified I was that they were telling me that I didn't understand no meant yes. And when I say they were like beating me, like they would just, for example, I'd be standing there one minute, the next minute, this fist of a man, I would get clubbed on the head as hard as someone. We're not talking like I get slapped a little bit. I mean, I would get clubbed onto the head so that my entire body would spin around and I might have a bleeding nose. I was being physically beaten in addition to having this electrocution head brace thing on my head and being fried. And I was also getting, they'd bring their guns out again and threaten me with killing me. So I remember I started crying, and I said, but you said no. And I said, you don't ever do that when for this. Everything else really does mean no, but this means yes. So they were telling me, okay, yeah, I could go ahead and obey because then sometimes my parents were telling me to do something and I wouldn't do it. I was scared, like, go clean your room. Okay, great. I'm going to clean my room, and then I'm going to get tortured for cleaning my room. You know, I told you to do this, or, you know, where do you want this over here? Yes, I do. And I just stop, hesitate, and think, okay, she said yes. And then my heart would start racing. Am I really supposed to put this over here? Because I think someone might jump out from around the corner and attack me. So over time, they started basically letting me know that, well, for everything else, we really mean it. We really mean yes and no. But for this sexual thing that they're doing, no means yes. Okay, so then imagine this. Then they all of a sudden, after doing this to me constantly, through my childhood, I mean all the time, then all of a sudden they take away the guns, take away the weapons, because they've already trained me, and by that time I'm paranoid, I'm scared to death of all of the things that they've done to me, and the things that they can do to me. And, you know, they bring in FBI and cops to reinforce what they were doing to me, and they were all saying, you know, nobody's going to help you. So I had no one to turn to. I had no option. I had no way to say no for myself. But then imagine how it looks to the outside when you take a regular, normal United States citizen, or any kind of citizen or person, and you bring them into the situation where, okay, there are no guns, no weapons, and suddenly you've got a videotape of this little girl, some man saying with his pants down, okay, well, why are his pants down in the first place? Well, let's just say he wanted to change his underwear. I mean, who knows? And this little girl's walking, is right up to him, and he's saying no, and she's still trying to give, she's still forcing her way to give him, looks like she's eagerly giving him a blowjob. I mean, he's pushing her head away, but she's pushing in. And she is looking pretty desperate to do this blowjob, even against his protests. Well, why was I so desperate? Yeah, because I'm getting tortured. So, you know, when it's a kid, it just looks like maybe you've got a sick kid on your hands. But then fast forward that to when it's a young woman, and there's a young man in the situation, and he's giving the exact same posture and trigger words that she was trained to respond to, because otherwise she'd maybe get killed and at least get violently beaten up and tortured. So now all of a sudden we have Mike Tanzer, you know, following in his great father's footsteps. You know, I don't know why they can't make this easier to put on. Standing in a room with a specific stance, with his pants down, fiddling around with his penis, and wanting me to notice the same way that his dad used to do, and some of these other government officials did. Using the exact same key code word, which sounds natural, using the exact same posture, and unbeknownst to me, I didn't realize that they were related. I didn't know who he was at the time. But he knew who I was, and his parents did, and so did the United States government. So all of a sudden, there I am, and I'm trying to give him a blowjob, and he says no, and I still give him a blowjob, and of course he lets me, but he made a show of saying no first. And, you know, when was that situation used? Well, it was used after he raped me the first time, because he raped me when I was under the effect of drugs that had been added to a drink that I had at a bar. So I was incapacitated, he raped me, and then all of a sudden his defense is to make it look like I'm a rapist. Now let's just picture that. Do you think that maybe there is a hidden camera somewhere in the room? I mean, just maybe. Because what greater achievement would the United States government have than to have a tape to try to show off and prove that, look, if we torture a kid repeatedly like we did Cameo Garrett throughout her childhood, look at the great results we can get later when such a child becomes an adult. Our United States government officials can just rape women whenever they want, a specific woman, and make her look like she's doing something wrong. So that is one example of a situation that the United States specifically used to throughout my childhood for years and on a constant basis to facilitate a rape of me when I was older. And all the same people are involved, and yes, they work for the government. Do I work for the government? What do you think? I mean, no. I do not work for the United States fucking government.